Hello, everybody. My name's Kimberly, and I'm just going to add to a little previous short video I made, which was about equipping your four-wheel drive. And I spoke specifically about battery systems, fridges, bull bars, and the like. Now, I've had another question, and it's about inverters. So I'm going to give you my approach, and when I do that, I also want you to recall that if you go and have a look at the previous video, the approach that I took there was my approach. It's not necessarily the approach you might want to take. It's only there for information, and it kind of tells you what my philosophy is. So, in a sense, I'm gonna give you that philosophy now. I believe that you want to think as a minimalist when you're planning to equip your four-wheel drive. And if you think as a minimalist, then you have to start with the survival and comfort aspects and move up from there. If you think as a maximalist, you're going to think, I like that bright, shiny object, and it's almost an addiction. You end up equipping the car with absolutely everything. But if you came back and asked yourself the question, do I need that, or is it a nice to have, or is it even beyond nice to have? It's kind of ridiculous. It's just showing off. Then you rethink your whole philosophy and you avoid that addiction. And what's the problem with that addiction? What I call shiny object syndrome results in four-wheel drives that weigh 4.6 tons. It results in vehicles that are overloaded. It results in this idea as well, which is a kind of against my touring philosophy, that I need to bring all the comforts of home with me rather than experience the world as perhaps people of other generations did, perhaps as my father and grandfather did, and my mother did, and my grandmother did, when they lived off the land or when they did things. So, in particular, my father spent a lot of time in stock camps, mustering camps, and bathed in a galvanized bathtub that was about, I don't know, you might bathe a child in. I've got photos of him in it. That's the sort of thing, And so I think that if you approach your remote area travel in that way, you actually have a more meaningful experience than trying to bring all the comforts from home. So that's my philosophy. Now, yours might be very, very different, and you might go, well, to hell with that. I don't care about that. I want to have all the comforts. If that's the case, then I would recommend you avoid doing some four-wheel drive tracks in Australia. Even the Simpson Desert has broken vehicles. I've seen Nissan Patrols broken in half in the Simpson Desert. The Canning Stock route, you take a heavily loaded vehicle on the Canning Stock route, you're going to break it. You take a heavily loaded vehicle on Amber Dell, it's going to suffer. All of these really remote kinds of tracks, heavy vehicles are a real penalty, and keeping them light should be the objective. That's my philosophy. So now let's get on to answering this question about inverters. And it was sort of like, well, the reason I have the lithium battery is because I want to run an inverter, and the lithium battery will stand up to that better. Well, that's absolutely true. There is no doubt about that. The current draw from an inverter is pretty damn high. If we want to work out what 12-volt current draw there is, then the simple answer is to divide the load in watts by 10 for a 12-volt system. So a 300-watt load will pull 30 amps. So now I want to use my 1,000-watt hairdryer, right? Well, guess what? That's 100 amps. That will smoke wires, right? It will certainly draw a lot from a battery. So yes, the lithium battery will certainly handle that better, but you better have some substantial wiring. And the lithium battery, while it will last a little bit longer, it just comes down to an ampere hour calculation. So if it's 110 amp hours, then the calculation about how long it lasts is directly about how much current it draws. And the simple answer to that is, how long will my battery last with that 1000 watt load? It lasts about as long as if you left your 100 watt spotlights. If you left 10 100 watt spotlights on, not just your two. If you left 10 100 watt spotlights on, how long do you think your battery would last? Many of us have left our 255 watt headlights and maybe 4 or 5 watt park or tail lights on, which is 130 watts total. And the battery goes flat really quickly. So how long is your battery going to last with 1000 watt plugged into the inverter? About as long as it would last if you put 10 100 watt spotlights on it. So I go, all right, the inverter is a really handy thing for some tiny little things. Certainly not the hairdryer. Although the hairdryer you're only going to hopefully use for a short period of time. If you've got long hair, well, then I wouldn't bring it. I wouldn't bring it at all, actually. But so, what do I carry an inverter then? Was the other question. And the simple answer to that is I don't any longer carry an inverter because I find I don't need it. It has been occasionally handy for very small items for which I have no other way to power them. So then what about all these devices that we have that come with these silly, what the Americans call wall warts, the little plug-in transformer that goes in the wall socket and a cable that comes out and plugs in? Perfect example is my satellite phones. Well, and the other really good example is laptops, and that's probably the most common thing that people will take with them for, that would require an inverter. So, if you're downloading lots of photos and you want to do something with them, whatever, then that's probably what you're most likely to use. So how do I do that? Because I do have a laptop. I don't use it very much when I'm running tours. I use it when I'm doing caravan weighing. So I'll go away for 3-4 days at a time, traveling, and I'll weigh caravans. And so I'm in the middle of a car park somewhere, in Wagga Wagga, and I've got no 240 volt power. I need a laptop to record the data for the caravans that I weigh. So, yeah, that's what you'll most likely use it for. So what do? All of my devices, every single one, including my laptop, my satellite phones, my tablets, my handheld radio, all of them. I'm trying to think if there are any others. Can't think of any. All of them, I've got DC converters. So for my laptop, I've got a 12 volt to 19 volt DC to DC converter. So for my radio, I've got, it's just a straight 12, I think, for the radio. 12 to 12, so it's just a cable, like a cigarette lighter socket type thing. For my 5-volt items, which are typically the things that run off USB, I've got 12-volt to 5-volt built into the car. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 USB outlets that operate off the 12-volt DC, so DC. So I have absolutely zero need for an inverter, and therefore I'm not tempted to take the 1000-watt device and plug it in and run my battery down. So I guess the short answer is that your lithium battery still won't save you if you want to run big current draw from your, using an inverter. It's not because the lithium battery can't handle the high current draw. It's because the lithium battery, despite its extra charge capacity, actually still won't have enough for those kinds of items. Your laptop's a different kind of story. It's not a huge current draw item. You're also just charging the battery. That's all you're really doing. So it's a bit of a different story. But I see things like, I want to have smoothies in the morning, so I have my smoothie making machine in the car. And you know who I see that from? I see it from the people who are sponsored by the manufacturers of the inverter systems, battery systems, and charger systems. That's who I see it from. Hey, here's a deal. You show people that you run some, of your, how about a smoothie maker? Why don't you show people you can take your smoothie maker out? See, because a smoothie maker doesn't run very long time. It may have a 750 watt motor, but it's a bzzz, and it's done, so yes, you could do that. The question is, why would you do that? I mean, smoothies are okay, but do I really want one in my car? And let me turn it into the question I asked at the beginning. Do I really need one in my car? And do I really need all that paraphernalia just to have a smoothie? The battery systems and all that. So that's my approach, and I hope that makes sense to you. So looking forward to more questions.